The Curses and the Covenants, A History Weaver Mystery, Book 2, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 24. August 20, 1898. As I am almost well now, but not quite strong yet, and I have time on my hands with little to do, I've been doing much thinking and much reading in Papa's old sermon preparation books that he bequeathed to me, his pulpit Bible and a few of his commentaries. I have been revolving my thoughts, too constantly around the subject of the deaths of my two Olivers, the little and the large, and shrinking away from the superstition of their deaths as the result of the curses of the sacred objects. First, of the cradle of the covenant, as I've come to call it, and second, of the curse that Oliver Senior brought on himself by appropriating, or shall I use plain language and call it stealing, the 7 pieces that the natives of our area hold to be sacred. I've come to look it in the face, and rather than reject the idea outright as I was wont to do, to ask myself if all and I did bring a curse on our little boy by our greed and lust for gold. Were we cursed by our willingness to break covenant with our friends? And did all bring down a curse on his own head with his willful determination to revenge, or I don't even know how to explain his behaviour that followed the death of little Ollie, culminating in the apprehension of the sacred objects. I don't believe in the curses in any sort of superstitious way, as, no doubt, the rightful owners of the objects do themselves. But in my faith in the Christian God, though I haven't ever previously bothered myself overly with him, I must acknowledge his sovereignty over the events that have so fundamentally altered my present and recent past. Rather than believe in the curses to reside in the cradle, or in the objects themselves, were all in our cursed? By God, I mean? For our treachery, were we being punished? It's the question driving me to distraction. I search the Bible's early stories, and my father's commentaries, and I see lesser offences punished more severely. I suppose I thought all and I too small to be struck with recompenses of biblical proportions. I suppose, if I thought of it at all, I thought our misdeeds too beneath God's notice for him to bother with. But with the grace extended to me through the hands of the women I wronged, and the blossoming new life within me, and also my knowledge of New Testament truths, of the God of mercy and love and forgiveness, I found myself in utter confusion. Which God is he? The God of wrath who takes a young child's life for the parent's wrongdoing? Or the God of mercy, love, and grace? I don't know the answer to my burning question. Why? That one word plagues me, presses on my soul day and night, with an insistence that will not be ignored. Pete was free that evening and we met at Peggy's at 7. He asked about Ma and I filled him in on her condition while we waited for our coffees and desserts. He listened attentively and asked pertinent questions. He was a very good listener, I'd noticed. It wasn't often that I was the one playing the speaker rather than the listener role. As much as I was uncomfortable talking about myself, it was a nice change. Pete knew how to get me to open up without making me feel awkward. From the subject of Ma and my change of situation, I was reminded of the potential hack job into my social media accounts and the attempt to break into my work computer. "What can you tell me about internet security?" I asked him. "Not a thing," he told me. "Definitely not my area of expertise. Any investigating I do is strictly on the ground. The detachment has its techie guy who handles the computer stuff. Why are you asking? Did you have a security breach?" "Not much of one. I think someone might have hacked my social media accounts." I explained what had happened, and then I mentioned the incident with the failure to log in at work. "The internet hacking, that happens all the time. If nothing was messed with, and you changed all your passwords, that's probably about all you can do. The other thing's more concerning. If it wasn't just some kind of computer glitch, that means that someone you know tried to get into your computer. You don't think the 2 hack attempts could be connected, do you?" Pete paused for a sip of coffee while he considered the question. Unlikely, he said slowly. Probably just a coincidence. Regardless, it's still concerning. Do you want to officially report it? He asked, half jokingly. No, it just gives me a weird feeling is all. I couldn't help suspecting Julia on that one. I don't like to think that she'd be getting into my personal records. I wouldn't put it past her. Trying to see what I've said about her, no doubt. But I don't like to think of her succeeding. I shouldn't jump to conclusions, though. It's just that I can't think of anyone else who would want to have a look inside my files on that computer. There's not much on there other than classroom stuff and my counselling files. Maybe a student wanted to get a preview of an upcoming test, Pete suggested, not entirely seriously. I laughed at his theory, but I had to admit that there could have been more reasons than just the one why someone had tried to crack my passcode. Speaking of that girl, any progress on your investigations? I asked. Stalled out, he said shortly. No pile of stones containing bodies of homeless men that you've discovered? Pete upended both palms in a gesture of futility. Where would we even start to look? In the woods, she told you. Well, Beaver Row is surrounded by woods on all sides. And not just surrounded, but infiltrated. It's a very wooded area. Unless she gives us more to go on, we won't be wasting taxpayer money combing every scrap of forest in and around the Beaver Row region to look for a suspicious-looking pile of stones. Not to mention, what would a suspicious pile of stones look like, as opposed to a naturally occurring one? So that's a no. We haven't made any progress there. And her other allegations? Sorry, you probably can't tell me. Well, you're in on them, so I can talk to you, if there was anything to say. But no, they're on hold. There just isn't any evidence that anything happened, either with the neighbor boy, her brother, or her dad. So until she gives us more to go on, we're letting it lie. I hope it didn't disrupt all their lives too much, I sighed. How could one troubled teen do so much damage for the sake of getting a little attention? Or a lot of attention in Julia's case. I kept my coffee consumption to 2 cups, as I didn't want to leave Ma alone too long. So I finished up, thanked Pete for meeting me, and headed back to Ma's house for the night. The coffee date hadn't been productive, but it had been a positive. And it didn't need to be productive, that wasn't the point. It had been nice to pour it all out into a listening ear and get Pete's perspective on things. If I could keep my deeper emotions in check to the point where I didn't get my heart hurt, he was a nice friend to have around. Larry, although also a nice friend to have around, was, in my mind anyway, becoming a situation. A situation I didn't want to have to deal with. Since that day at the Cherryton Hospital, when I'd been given my first clue that there was a possibility I might be able to hurt his heart, I'd avoided any one-on-one interactions with him. He'd come up to the hospital in Cherryton to visit one more time while Ma was still admitted, but, fortunately for me, Sarah and her parents had also been present, so there was no awkward alone time for Larry and I. Since I'd been back at work, the easy chatter over a cup of coffee in the break room that we'd once shared had started to feel stilted, and I dodged out of it quickly, unless there was another staff person in earshot. I didn't want any repeats of emotional scenes like the one in the hospital when he'd told me he cared. He'll get the hint, I told myself. We won't have to discuss it further. And it did seem to be working. Our dynamic had changed. Our light banter was gone, replaced by small talk. He always looked more serious than I was used to seeing him, almost sad, and a trifle cool, I felt. It gave me a pang if I had caused that change in him. Could I just be imagining things? After his attentiveness when he came that first day in the hospital, I didn't think so. I just had to harden my heart and keep the distance between us for his own good. It might hurt in the short run, but hurt less in the long run than encouraging a closer friendship between us. During coffee break, the morning after my coffee with Pete, Larry was the only one pouring himself a cup of coffee in the break room. I almost turned in the doorway and walked out before he saw me, but if he'd happened to notice me, that would have been a little too pointed. I'd better get the cup of coffee I'd planned on. Besides, there was something outside of the danger zone of anything personal between us that I wanted to ask him. Hey, Larry, weird question for you. I'm just wondering how Julia's doing in your computer class. Is she exceptionally good on computers? I mean, would she have hacker potential? She actually is quite gifted technologically. I wouldn't know about hacker potential, he answered, looking surprised. Did Julia make it for second period? No, she wasn't in computer class. She wasn't in your English class first period either? She was a no-show. I didn't get any memo from the secretary about anyone calling in an excused absence. Maybe I should go see if the office knows anything. I didn't get any information either. Let me know if you discover anything. His expression clearly said, "What now?" An expression any mention of Julia was likely to provoke in any of us who knew her. Since that moment of reality with her yesterday, however, I'd found a new compassion for her. She certainly was one hurting human being. Her raw display of open despair that I'd seen had been no act. I'd been sure of that. That was the real Julia. A very anguished 15-year-old. I was more concerned over her absence than I would have been otherwise. The school secretary hadn't had any phone calls from Julia or her parents. George showed up for class. I presume their parents would have dropped them both off at the same time, Teresa Green, the secretary, informed me. The Fairchilds are always really good about calling if someone's sick or has an appointment. That's unusual. It's unusual for Julia to miss classes at all, actually. For all her other faults, she doesn't play truant. I think I'd better call Mrs. Fairchild and check. I stood and listened while Teresa held the phone to her ear and listened to the ringing on the other end. Eventually, she said, "Oh, hi, Tamara. Teresa Green here, just checking to see if there's a reason that Julia hasn't shown up for either of her classes this morning. Is she at home?" I waited through the short pause while Tamara answered the question on her end. Then Teresa said, "Ms. Lyons is right here. She was asking about her. I can pass the phone to her. She'll be able to tell you more." I took the phone from the secretary's hand and said, "Hello?" into it. "Hi, Angie. Julia didn't show up for first class?" "No, and she didn't show up for her second class either." "I'll try paging her to the office," Teresa hissed in an undertone. "Ms. Green is just paging her to see if she's anywhere in the school," I said to Tamara. "Do you want to hold the line while we see if she comes?" "Yes, I do. We need to get to the bottom of it." I could hear the secretary's voice in front of me and echoing out in the hallway through the speaker system. "While we're waiting, do you mind telling me when you saw her last this morning? Did you drop her at the school yourself?" I asked into the phone. "Yes, I did. I saw her off. She and George both went into the front door of the school together." "Well, if she doesn't answer the page, we'll check with George and we'll see what he knows," I told their mother. "Don't worry, we'll figure it out," I said soothingly. I could hear the panic building in Tamara's voice. Was the girl hiding out in one of the unoccupied rooms in the school? What was she playing at now? There was no answer to the secretary's page. "Maybe we'd better page George next and let Edie know what's up," I whispered to Teresa. "We'll give you a call back as soon as we know more," I told Tamara and hung up. George showed up within a minute or two. His eyes were wide like he thought he might be in trouble. I'd filled Edie in quickly, and she followed me to the school office, arriving only a few seconds ahead of George. She took the situation in hand. "Can you tell us when you saw your sister last, George?" the principal asked him in a calm tone. His face tightened. I was sure he was tired of anything approaching on the subject of his sister. I know I would have been. "We both got dropped off together this morning," he told us. "We went into the school together and I went to my locker to get my books. I didn't pay any attention to what she did. I just assumed she went off to her class. Wasn't she in class?" "What was the last thing she said to you?" Edie asked, ignoring George's question for the moment. "Nothing. We don't exactly talk." "She didn't say anything at all as you went into the school? Not, 'Goodbye, see you later'? Nothing?" "No. Like I say, we don't talk if we don't have to. We just went our separate ways." "So you didn't see which way she went after she got into the school?" "No, she was behind me. I didn't notice where she went after she got in the door." "If you're wondering why we're quizzing you, it's because Julia wasn't in any of her classes today, and your mom doesn't know where she is either." "Was there anything Julia said before you left for school? Or in the car that would give you any idea where she might be now? Did she mention any plans? No, she wouldn't though, would she? If she was planning on skipping, she wouldn't exactly announce that fact. No, not likely, Edie said in her same calm tone. Okay, thank you, George. If you think of anything that might be helpful that we should know, come and tell me, will you please? Yeah, sure, the teenager said. I doubted he'd be any help, though. I was starting to be more worried than I had been initially. It was true that playing hooky wasn't Julia's typical style. That wasn't her preferred method of creating a disturbance. But maybe she was getting tired of her usual method of seeking attention. Maybe this was a new stage. At any rate, I had a class to teach.